What makes one country think it could travel across the world, sending its people to subjugate others, leaving chaos in its wake? What were the roots behind this sort of thinking? These are questions for another sermon, perhaps. Today, however, you do have a reason, as if any were needed, to spend the day eating plantain and jollof rice, pounded yam and vegetable stew, my personal favorite, finished off with some chin-chin, that's sweet biscuits, while you binge-watch Nollywood films until dawn. In honor of Nigerian Independence Day, I wanted to offer a lesson in Pidgin English. Pidgin is a bit of a safe bet for a nation that has 5 prominent languages and over 500 additional indigenous languages. Using Pidgin means you don't have to show your politics or tribal affiliation. So when I say, "Wetin dey happen," meaning what's happening or what's going on, please could you reply, "Wahala dey o." Okay? Wahala dey o. Okay? Wahala dey o simply means that there is trouble or there is a problem. So let's try that. Wetin dey happen? I could hear the wonderful scholars, but I could not hear the congregation or those of you online. So let's try that one final time. Wetin dey happen? You can imagine people saying "Wahala dey o" every single time that Jesus showed up. We hear in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, when he entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority?" As one scholar puts it, "By what authority" is not simply an inquiry from wary leaders or religious authorities consumed with proper credentials. It is a legitimate question, a justified question that Jesus has to answer. You don't get to go around and talk about God the way Jesus does and then skirt this issue. Typically, however, Jesus answers the question with a question, tying the religious leaders up in knots as they struggled to respond. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin? And they argued with one another. If we say from heaven, he will say to us, "Why then did you not believe him?" But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the crowd, for all regard John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." While the authorities may have had every right to ask the question, Jesus also knew what they were doing. Who gave you the right was the question that they were really asking. Who gave you the right to show up, to embarrass us, to disregard us, to mock us? Who gave you the right to be more welcomed than us, to be more engaging than us, to be more accepting than us? Wetin dey happen? Of course, Jesus means trouble because his mere presence is disruptive. What Jesus ushers in is a new way of being and thinking and seeing the world, and it gives us a certain kind of purpose that emboldens us and fills us up with divine love and means that we cannot unsee that which has been seen. Going to school should not have to be a matter of life and death. Eliane Andam was stabbed and killed at a bus stop on her way to school last week. The Bishop of Croydon, Dr. Rosemary Mallet, who was here recently unveiling the plaque to commemorate Kwabena Ottobah Kuguano, read a statement from Eliane's family that said that they were overwhelmed by sorrow and grief. We, as a family, are struggling to comprehend this painful tragedy that has happened to our beautiful daughter and beloved sister Eliane, the statement said. Here, Bishop Rosemary used her authority to lend a voice to those whose voices had been hollowed out by grief. Waiting they happen. The problem is not the young people, but a culture that ignores gender-based violence in the hope that it will simply go away. Eliane was the 15th teenager to die this year in our capital, and we are still only in September. Yes, there is a problem here, and there needs to be a conversation about knife crime and gender-based violence without criminalizing every black and brown boy in London and in our other cities. With great authority comes great responsibility. We hear in the letter to the Philippians, chapter 2, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Now, perhaps this is what the government thought it was doing when it ignored the reality of the climate emergency. Again, last week, the development of the UK's biggest untapped oil field, Rosebank, which lies to the west of Shetland in Scotland, was given the go-ahead, despite widespread opposition from scientists, poverty campaigners, and climate and energy experts. Waiting to happen. Yes, you are right. There is a problem here. The trouble and challenge of the climate crisis seems to be held as something far off by those in authority and those who we know better. A hot September isn't what we're really talking about here. When countries burn and cities flood, we will not be able to say that we were not told. We do not need any new oil fields to be drilled to help our transition from oil and gas to a more sustainable way of living. You can take the colonizer out of empire, but you can't take empire out of them. We see that this is a colonial mentality that does not recognize consequence or seek accountability. Waiting to happen. The authority bestowed on Jesus through God is used to teach and share a vision of a different type of world in which those on the margins of society get front row seats at Wimbledon, and those stripped of their dignity and humanity are given a place in the royal box. When authority is used to undermine human rights, we need to stay alert and respond. For the Home Secretary to attack the UN Refugee Agency's 1950 Convention is an abuse of power that needs to be called out. She knows it, and she does not care. So, wetin dey happen? The Refugee Convention was drawn up following World War II and has at its center the principle that refugees should not be returned to countries where they face threats to their life or freedom. In a speech this past week, the Home Secretary may have no idea what people endure to reach our shores, and instead, she stokes the fires of hatred through self-advancing rhetoric. Whether you agree with her or not, we need to quench the fires of hatred with the waters of justice. Because this kind of dangerous talking is just the kind of talking that leads us to isolation, then segregation, and then deportation. Her speech was applauded by the far right. This is authority misused, and authority misused is authority abused. Wetin dey happen? Let's try that again. Wetin dey happen? Is there? Is there really trouble? Because the Home Office figures show that 1,334 asylum applications were lodged in the UK in 2022, where sexual orientation formed part of the basis for the claim. This represented only 1.5% of the 74,751 asylum claims made last year. The trouble is not Jesus, or black or brown people, or teenagers, or women, or the LGBTQ+ community. The wahala is unfettered authority and privilege. The wahala is the culture that does not address men's mental health and the toxicity of online communities, videos, and personalities. The wahala is the masculinity that defines itself through violence. On a national scale, the wahala is intentionally reckless rhetoric that will only bring more wahala. Wetin dey happen? How will we use our authority? Author and authority share the same root. And if we are to become authors, creators of a more just, more equitable world, we need to have the vision to see what is happening, the courage to call out the wahala and place all our hope on God to show us how to use the authority we have for the greater good. Yes, wahala deo, but there is no wahala greater than the love and peace and justice of God. The authority of God, as seen in Jesus Christ, makes clear what we have to do. Time and time again, we see that Jesus' authority is used for inclusion and for justice. We heard in the psalm, "You spread out a cloud for a covering, and a fire to give light in the night season." It has been a week in which the night season may have felt overwhelming, and for so many reasons. Yet our yearning for brighter days must be underpinned by an authority that seeks not to conquer, but redistribute, that seeks not to dehumanize, but understand, and that seeks not to destroy, but to rebuild and restore. Amen.